Democratic congressman and chairman of the Long Island University Global Institute, Steve Israel. I'm still going to call you Congressman Israel. Nice to see you. How are you?
Sounds good. Good to see you,
So the
Kate.
new Republican-controlled Congress, we've been talking about it since the top of the show. They threatened to gut this Congressional Ethics Office. They flipped around and decided not to do that just a couple of hours ago, 180-degree turn. As a former member of Congress, how do you read what you're seeing?
You know, there are some phrases that you do not want associated with your first day of a new Congress. Behind closed doors, gutting ethics. These are words that you really don't want to hear on your first day. And this is the narrative. And so it reflects certain things. Number one, Paul Ryan, for all the unity he has in his caucus right now, is presiding over a very unruly caucus, and he's got some real problems ahead of himself. And secondly, it reflects a Republican caucus that fundamentally wants to play by rules that are different from the rules that the American people play by. Those two things together don't bode well for this Congress.
As we continue to watch that small box in the corner of your screen, is Paul Ryan swearing in and welcoming all the new members of Congress. Let's talk about what Republicans thought we'd be emphasizing today, and that is the repeal of Obamacare, right? That's one of their big priorities.
Yeah.
Debate's going to start tomorrow in the Senate on this. What can Democrats do? Is there anything Democrats, your colleagues, can do to stop a repeal of Obamacare?
Well, you know, I talked to both Republicans and Democrats today to get a feel for what was happening. And really, Republicans said we wanted the news story today to be about repealing the Affordable Care Act. I said to them, that's fine. I know that was your desire. It got eclipsed by this dismantling of ethics, which you then took back. But what are you going to repeal it with? And there are no answers. They have no replacement. It's good. This is going to tell the American people the difference between cheap sound bites in a campaign, we're going to repeal Obamacare, and the substance of governing. What are we going to replace it with? And they don't have a plan.
They have the votes to repeal it.
No, it's going to be easy. Easy to repeal it. Virtually impossible to replace it, which is why they are so divided right now. They are having a debate within the Republican caucus as to what do we replace it with. And some Republicans want to repeal it and replace it instantly, but they don't have anything to replace it with. Others say, well, let's do this off-ramp. Let's repeal it, and then at some point we'll get around to replacing it with something. What really counts here is this. Although the brand of Obamacare may be unpopular in some quarters, the substance of Obamacare is very, very popular with the American people. And when Republicans begin to tinker, when they begin to try and take away those consumer protections from the American people, they're going to have a major problem in the midterm election. What you saw, let me make this final point, what you saw on the floor of the House today was Republicans and Democrats raising their hand and swearing their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. In the back of their minds, they're trying to protect and defend their seats in Congress in the midterm election. And if they hurtle into a repeal of Obamacare, taking those consumer protections away from the American people, their majority becomes imperiled in the next midterm election.
What about other regulations? One of the other things they're looking at is getting rid of some of the Obama measures, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was created under Dodd-Frank, some of the other regulatory reforms that we went to after the financial crisis. Do you think they succeed in repealing, undoing some of those?
Well, they're certainly going to try. Here's what I think we're looking at over the next few weeks. First, the low-hanging fruit. They're going to pass a resolution condemning the United States' abstention in the Security Council on Israel. So they'll do that pretty quickly. They'll have the votes. It's going to pass. Then they're going to try and repeal certain regulations under the Obama administration, mostly environmental. They're going to make it easier to remove mountaintops from mountains. That's something that everybody wants to see. And so they are going to try and repeal some of these regulations. That's going to be easy for them to do as well. But when you get into the hard part of governing, which is what do we use to replace Obamacare? And oh, by the way, the federal budget expires on March 31st, and you have a caucus that still has elements that want to shut down the government and don't fundamentally believe in government investments. That's when it gets hard, which is why I think not only was today very bumpy for them, but it portends many, many more days of bumpiness.
It's interesting, though, you did just say it's going to be easy for them to reverse some of the regulations. And I want to go to something the Washington Post reported that last month the House Freedom Caucus began compiling a a list of more than 200 regulations that it views as vulnerable to a disapproval vote. They include school lunch standards, tobacco regulations, laws that set higher wages for contractors, and elements of the Paris climate change agreement. So that's a whole lot of different subjects there. But do you agree that it would be fairly easy for them to reverse some of those quickly?
Well, they've got the votes in the House, they've got the votes in the Senate. They have this new rule, by the way, that says that when a regulation is enacted, the Senate can, by a simple majority vote, essentially rescind that regulation. So they've got that ability. But here's the caution that I would give Republicans, not that they invite me to their strategy meetings. This is a big day for them. Yeah, this is a big day for them. But if they're smart, they're going to remember 2008. In 2008, that we elected Barack Obama. We had a massive Democratic majority in the House, a majority in the Senate. And some would argue that we overreached, that we misread a margin as a mandate, and that we tried to accomplish too much too quickly. You know what happened in 2009? We began losing Democratic elected officials locally. And in 2012, we lost 63 seats in the House. And in 2014, we lost the Senate. And so if the Republicans try and engage in massive repeals, undoing critical environmental regulations, undermining ethics as they tried to do today, you watch, you're going to see a very significant, a different political terrain for them going into the next midterm election. They're going to be defending more seats than they really planned on defending.
Former Congressman Steve Israel of New York, always good to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Up next, the search for a killer. Turkish